It took me years to become comfortable with the idea of selling my products and services, of asking people for their hard earned cash, of taking that from them and then hopefully delivering them massive value in return. Today, I interview an amazing sales coach. Her name is Andee Hart, and she runs a podcast called She Sells Differently and also has a coaching program all around authentic, ethical sales. She has a brilliant mindset around this with 17 years of experience of working in corporate sales and moving into running her own business and then becoming the salesperson or the figurehead for that business and now coaching other business owners on selling their products and services. What I love about Andee's approach is it comes from a place of service, of starting every sales conversation not with the end in mind of and how am I going to close this deal, but how can I help this person? And then the sale becomes natural, it becomes effortless, and also becomes enjoyable, that you feel like it's a win-win for both of you. And that is exactly the type of selling that I love to do. And that's why I really enjoyed this interview. I got a lot from it. I learned a few new tricks, and it was also a great opportunity to discuss what I've learned over the years about selling, both good and bad. Enjoy. So the question is this: how do entrepreneurs like us who don't have an endless supply of cash, how do we leverage the best apps, virtual assistants, automation tools and systems to scale our businesses, increase our profits and have more time to do what we love to do each day? That is the question, and this podcast will give you the answer. My name's Dr. Steve Day and this is Systemize Your Success. Hi, Andee. Thank you so much for coming on the show. I am really excited about this. We're just talking off.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, cool. Sorry, I interrupted you saying hello too. I was just saying, like, just before we came on, like the conversations I love having are ones where I feel like I'm going to get a lot of benefit from having this conversation. And sales is something that I believe you are quite good at and help people do. And it's one of the areas which I feel, whether it's the marketing or the sales or the products, like I'm not bad at it, but I know I can be better. And so I'm excited about this conversation because I think I'm going to learn a lot from this. And in having a very open and honest conversation about the challenges that I face, and hopefully that you can add some help and insights to that, then that will hopefully help listeners as well. And you can bring in anything that you know is going to help the people who are listening to this alongside anything that I might bring up. How does that sound?
Sounds perfect. Yes, I think you're not alone. I was going to say I think you're not alone, but I know you're not alone because there are so many people that I talk to every day that when I tell them I'm in sales, they just cringe and they shy away and say I hate sales, but it's just a natural part of every day of our lives. And so it's important to talk about whether you carry a quota or whatever industry you're in. So I'm glad that you are addressing it on your podcast.
Absolutely. And also, like, I think I come from a place of, like you described, like apps, like some people absolutely hate sales. And I was one of those people. Like felt like I was doing something wrong asking people for money. And like that it wasn't appropriate or polite. For that reason, like I think the early days, I struggle with it internally massively. And that was 10 years ago now. So I have come a long way since then. But I also know for anyone listening to this who is in that place where it almost feels like you shouldn't have to ask for the money, but like how do you help people overcome that position of maybe you've never had to sell anything before and you are just selling for the first time, or maybe you're increasing your prices to a place that you start feeling comfortable, like those big steps that you take through your
Yeah.
business? Like how do you help people get over that initial challenge and then make those incremental changes on the way forward?
Yeah, so let's start back at something you just said. You mentioned, several years ago, you were one of those people and you said, I didn't like asking people for money. It felt weird. It felt awkward. And so I think it's important to address why we feel uncomfortable. And no one in sales really talks about this, but a lot of times we have had experiences. First off, culture often tells us that it's uncomfortable to ask people for money. And then we've had experiences where we have been sold to, where we have been asked for money. And what we've been asked for and what we've been promised, there's been a big delta. There's been a big gap there. And so we have been left feeling that we have not gotten the value that we were promised. And so we were sold something and then we weren't delivered on the results. And so what happens as a result of that, that happens time and time again, then we are thinking as human beings, we're like, I don't want to be that person or to give that experience to someone else, that poor experience, and leave that bad taste in someone else's mouth. And I think we've all come through that, whether we're buying a car or we're shopping for an appliance or, fill in the blank, right? And so that just over time can lead to you being afraid to sell your product or your service. And something that I always tell my clients over and over again, when you have a product or a service that brings people value, then you actually owe it to share it with them. But when you are sharing the transformation, then really the asking for money, it's not asking for money. And this is where the mindset shift happens. It's not asking for money, it's providing them with value. And at the end of the day, they are actually handing over their money because they want what you can provide if you have done the sales process right. And so that's where I think a lot of people miss. But also, and we can talk about this in a minute, the sales process doesn't end there. And that's what I think our culture teaches us is that the sales process leaves when the money exchanges hands. And that is the missing piece that we want to then deliver on what we have promised and deliver an exceptional customer experience. And so that is all about what I talk about in my company, She Sells Differently, because we want to learn how to sell and deliver an excellent customer experience. And quite honestly, in today's modern society, it's all about give me the money and then here's some form of what I promised and we're out, right? So I think it's just bad experiences. And once you can learn how to provide an excellent experience, and you have no problem, quote, selling what you're offering.
Awesome. I'm going to dive into a lot of things you just said then, but before I do, and I want to take a step back and
Yeah.
tell us how you got into all this.
Oh,
I wanted to jump in just to get the conversation
yes.
started, but I want to actually know a little bit more about Andee. Like where did Andee Hart start your journey on becoming the person you are today? And actually tell us what you do now, because I think it's really fascinating. And I love your Instagram site. I was checking it out before the show. So yeah, let us know a little bit about you, where you came from, why you do what you do, and why you do what you do now.
It is so funny. My journey, if you had told me I was going to be doing what I do now 10 years ago, I would have laughed. But I am a sales strategist for product-based entrepreneurs. I started during the pandemic, I started a candle company, Heart Design Co. Still have my candle company, and I wholesale my candles to boutiques all over globally. And so that has been a fun journey. But I actually started out when I was in college. I wanted to be a dance teacher. I grew up dancing. I did tap, jazz, ballet, all that. And I had a plan my senior year of college, a business plan to start a dance studio in Tennessee, which is the where I was born and raised. And I had a professor in college that I recently reconnected with, and just funny, we got to laugh about this story, but we were on an American Marketing Association trip to Nashville, Tennessee, and we were touring a technology company, a large technology company then, and they were interviewing and they said, "We have a couple of your alumni that work here. We're interviewing right now. So anyone that wants to interview, we know you don't have resumes, but you can interview now." And she made me interview that day. And she said, "You're going to interview and you'll thank me later." And I was within months, like this was March of my senior year. I was planning on starting my dance studio in May, June. And so I interviewed because she made me, got the job, and just after a lot of prayer and wisdom and counsel, just decided to take the job for a year or two, save up some money, get some real world experience. Realized I'm actually really good at sales and love it. And 17 years later, I was still in sales. I worked my way up at that company and another technology company that I had started working for. And that is when I, in the meantime, had started my candle company in 2020 and made the jump in 2023 to full-time entrepreneurship. So it is just funny how we plan our steps and wanted to be a dance teacher, but got into sales, ended up loving it, and just learned so much about sales, leadership, and technology because I work for two big technology companies, all skills that I needed for what I'm doing today. And so, yeah, just a kind of a crazy story that led to where I am today as an entrepreneur.
Yeah, very cool. So I'm interested though, 17 years experience or working as a successful sales executive in the corporate industry. How
Yeah.
does that translate to the type of selling you do now? Being a
Yeah.
boutique, small business, like, do you see like completely transferable skills, or is there a different art to it when you're talking about small versus corporate?
I would say there's a hybrid. It's There are some skills in sales that are just innate and transferable no matter what kind of sales you're doing. I think that's the tenacity and the being willing, if what you're doing or the approach that you have with a client or how you're selling your products or your services, if your messaging, and this is so important, if your messaging is not resonating, because sometimes it's not about your product or your service, it's simply about the way you're communicating and your messaging. But if you can just pivot that a little bit and continue to put your product and service out there, what I have found is that it will start to resonate and you will start to hear yes, yes, yes. And I learned that early on in my very first year out of college, working in a small business queue selling computers to small businesses. And so that was such an important lesson. And that is translated to entrepreneurship. What has been a harder transition is I spent years selling face to face and building relationships with C-level executives, which you think would be, if you can do that, you can sell to anyone. Selling online and learning how to communicate written and sell, you know, on a sales page and with, email marketing and social media is a whole different ballgame. And so I have really had to take some of those skills and tweak them and learn that face-to-face selling is very different than written communication. And so your messaging matters even more when you are writing that out because that's all people are seeing. They're not seeing your body language and they're not being able to build a relationship with you sometimes before they buy. So, kind of both sides of the coin.
Yeah, totally. And I've worked with quite a few clients who've made that shift from the world of corporate into the world of
Yeah.
small business, because a lot of what I help people do is to figure out how to build the systems, the operational systems around them, so they can do whatever it is their superpower is. So if you're the sales or you're the product designer
Yeah.
or whatever it is, then like, how does all that other stuff get done? And because coming from a corporate world, and I have this experience working in medicine when I had just teams of people all around me, they did everything that I didn't do. And suddenly, when you're a small business owner, an entrepreneur, you are everything, and you have to
Oh,
figure
yes.
out all the pieces of the puzzle. And so, how do you find that transition from the corporate to the being one of many to being one of one, or maybe you have a small team
Yeah.
around you, but you're now the person making, all those decisions. And like, did you struggle getting the balance between sales and operations? Like, are you super sales sided and then the operations were left to their own devices for a bit, or how did you get that balance right?
I would say I really enjoy the operations. I I'm fascinated by them. I think that's probably my technology background just a little bit to some degree. Um, the it is a hard balance in learning and reminding yourself of what moves the needle, especially when you are a solopreneur. And so, what I have found as one of the hardest things is understanding, and this is different for everyone, what is my 20%? My 20% that not only find enjoyment with, but that I am gifted with, and that I can make the most impact with in my business. And then the next thing is, and the mistake I made early on is finding just kind of a generalist that says they can do all of this other stuff that I want to outsource. And that's not really the right thing either, because you want to find someone that they have a great 20%. And so I'll give you a perfect example. I started a podcast, right? And so instead of just finding a VA that could handle doing some podcast work, I found someone that's all they did. They specialized in that. That was their 20%. And she's phenomenal at what she does. And so I learned that lesson early on and got burnt a little bit by someone that tried to do everything and did everything not so well. And so that's something that I've had to really watch for myself as well as what am I really good at? And so sometimes, and something you said recently on one of your podcast episodes is that you're really good at getting to that 75%, but then you need someone to kind of take over the details, right? And I realize I'm similar in that aspect. So I need someone, I'm good at the big ideas, but I need someone to execute on the details. And so I've had to learn that. And, back in corporate, I had the team to do it. And now I have to go hire that and find the right people for it. And so it's been a transition for sure.
And how have you approached sales in that respect? Have you kept sales as Andee takes care of sales, or have you managed to, or decided to actually bring in sales representatives as well for the business?
So both, and you'll appreciate this too. I've automated some of that to some degree, especially from the beginning stages of sales when I am selling some of my more low ticket offerings. And so I have automated as much of that as possible. And then something I have realized, and this is just natural from my past corporate experience, but I will convert at a lot higher rate when I get someone on a call with me and face to face, and I sell, once they get to know me. And so something I have incorporated into my sales process is once they get to a certain interest level, or, they're interested in a certain course or program, part of that process is getting on a call with me. And so at that level, that is me. That is all me. But the other sales is actually not on anyone else. It is just it's really an automated, marketing funnel. And then, of course, in my candle company, that is really something that I have outsourced quite a bit, because I just don't have the time or capacity now that I'm doing a lot of coaching. And so I have definitely pushed all of that and outsourced all of the sales there.
Yeah, I know. Interesting to hear. I mean, my journey similar to you. I mean, I'm mine's a high ticket coaching program, is
Hmm.
the term people often use, and for me that means that at this stage I don't have a team of coaches that are working under my banner, or as using my IP or whatever. It's just me doing the coaching, and so I believe that like people in that respect are buying from me. They're buying me and my experience and time, and so I've tried to work with salespeople in the past to actually do the conversions, and the percentages were just not. It was
Yeah.
made no financial sense for me to do it because they couldn't convert anything like the levels that I can. Because when I'm on that call and I'm having that conversation, they're buying into the person that you are, and
Hmm.
and so like if like for me in my business, right now, it makes perfect sense for me to actually own that space. But
Yep.
just the reason I want to bring that in is because I think that because of my initial discomfort of selling, try to move that out. Try to say, look, I wonder if I could just not be a part of this, whether it's through like automation and whatever. Like, yeah, it works as you say for the low ticket stuff. When you're getting into the higher and higher ticket,
Hmm.
unless you are Russell Brunson or someone like super well known, Alex Hormozy, you're
Right.
going to have to probably speak to this person before they're going to trust you enough to give you
Yeah.
thousands and thousands of dollars. And so, therefore, like stepping into that for me was just an owning it rather than trying to find ways to avoid it was made a huge difference, not only to my business in terms of sales, but also to me, because once I accepted it and took it on board, I started enjoying it. Whereas
Yeah.
before, it was always a means to an end. But
Yep.
then when I realized that actually, no, this can be, like you said before, if you're coming from a place of service and you're selling for the right reasons and you actually
Hmm.
believe what you do is value and it does actually produce results for the people that buy into you, then once you believe that for yourself, I think then it can become enjoyable. And that's the journey that I found.
So there's a couple of things that you just said there that are critical to part of the process. One is believing in what you are selling and the transformation that you provide. And it's interesting enough because I just recorded a podcast episode yesterday talking about
What's your podcast called, Andy?
She Sells Differently is the name of my podcast. And the title of this episode it'll release in a few weeks. It's called No One Cares About Your Product. It's kind of one of those hot takes, but the point of the episode is that if you don't care about your product and you're not passionate about it, then no one else is going to either. And so you have to be confident and you have to know that what the product or the service that you're providing that it provides a transformation. So not only from just an enthusiasm and a confidence perspective, but also for me from an ethical perspective, I can't sell something that I am not 100% confident is going to accomplish the goal that I have uncovered my client is trying to get at. And so that's another part of this process. You were talking about getting on a call with someone and we're talking about having client calls and that if you're doing a high ticket program, this is inevitably something that you are probably going to need to implement as a part of your business. And I have found so many people are nervous about these, but when you get on these calls, if you do have the mindset first off and you take out of your mind I am trying to pitch them my product or my service or my high ticket program. And you are instead, my whole goal in this call is to uncover the problem they're trying to solve, to get to know this person, and just to genuinely serve them. And that is your mindset. What inevitably happens, and I'm talking 9 out of 10 times, that person by the end of the call will be asking you, tell me about your program. Tell me, you're not pitching your program. They are trying to pull it out of you. And so that is the point that I get to in a sales call that my mindset is so invested in that person and learning about their business and uncovering their goals, their desires, what they want for their business, what they see as their ideal transformation so that I can even know if my product or my service or my program is going to serve them. Because I might disqualify them right up front. And there have been several sales calls that I have said, it's gotten to the point where they've said, tell me about your program. I said, I will be happy to, but let me tell you, it is not the right fit for you. Let me tell you about someone else I met, I was on a podcast with, and they are the right fit for you. And this is why. And that's hard to do as an entrepreneur. But if you really have the mindset that you're serving someone, then you're willing to say no and you're willing to direct them into the right space that's going to serve them in their business. And so that is always where I come from and a sales call. And inevitably they're asking me about the program before I can even get to the point where I'm telling them about it.
Yeah, I love that. And just hearing what you're saying then about pushing people away, that took a long time for me. I think it does with most people to have the confidence that actually that is the not only the right thing for them, but it's the right thing for us as business owners. And I
Yeah.
interviewed a great guy called Chet Majaria on the podcast. He wrote a book called The Right Clients, and it's all about this: that you need to only accept the right clients into your business, because every wrong
Hmm.
client you accept is a massive drain on energy and resources and time,
Oh yeah.
and it actually doesn't serve you or them, and there's just ends up with bad energy or negative energy from both sides, and that doesn't help anybody. So
Yeah.
what you just said then about actually having the confidence to say no, I think is one of the hardest lessons to learn, especially when money's tight. But doing that shows you have integrity and authenticity, and you are coming from a place of genuine service, which I think is brilliant.
Yeah. And you think about that from, and I learned this lesson in corporate. I had several amazing mentors in corporate that would teach, that taught me that. But do you think about that on the back end? If, you know, full circle back to what I said at the beginning, if I sell them on this course and they buy into it, and there's a big delta and a big gap in their expectations, and they have a bad experience, right? And they have a bad experience, and whether or not I have to deal with that or, they have to deal with it, it doesn't matter. That is just a poor taste in their mouth of what they were sold. And they're going to go share that with other people. And what is the number one marketing in your business? It's word of mouth. And so instead, and this is a real life example of someone that I told, you're not ready for my program. Not that you're not ready, but my program's not a right fit for your goals. And a year later, she came back and she ended up investing in my program because her goals had changed and she was ready. And so inevitably, two things will happen is that they will share their great experience with you because they're stunned, right? This is a person of integrity, someone you do want to work with. Or they'll come back around and want to work with you in some capacity just because of who you are and who your brand is. And so that is what I want to be about. That's why I name my business She Sells Differently, because it's so different than what culture teaches you, what I was taught in corporate, that you overcome every objection. Not necessarily. Not every customer's for you.
No, but you just reminded me of a sales conversation I had relatively recently, and towards the end of last year, and a client came on, and I had my initial call with them, exactly like you described. They're finding out what their biggest challenges are, trying to work out if I can help them. If what I do in the way I describe it, if I can do what I do
Mhm.
easiest to give them the most value, if that is a good fit, then it's a good fit for both of us. Whereas if I've got to work hard or they're not going to get as much value, then it's not going to work. So that sort of mentality. And I went into this really like positively with this sort of attitude coming towards the end of last year. And they went away and I said, look, I always book a follow up call unless it's an absolute no. Book a follow up call just to sort of recap. And in this case, he came back with a 2-page reasons why I should accept him onto the program and why I should work with him. Like, because he was just so bought into that he wanted help from
Yes.
me. And I was like, actually, after seeing this version of your story and understanding this version of your challenges, I'm like, 100% yes. Hell yes. You're in.
Yeah.
He convinced me. And that, like, that's just mind blowing as a somebody who came from a position of like fighting for sales and like, what do you mean no? I can help you, and just like chasing like I don't know, just a completely incompetent
Yeah.
person trying to like grab at everything to being the person that's actually pushing people away. And then it's like that's transformation. Like, yeah, you just reminded me of that, and I'm so glad you did
Yeah.
because it was just a huge like wow,
I
yeah,
love that. I love that story. I think that there's, to some degree, there's so much sales psychology in that too, which I love studying sales psychology and buyer psychology. But most importantly, Just coming back to that, ultimately, you were trying to serve. Your goal was to serve that person. And I think at the end of the day, and I don't want to, lump every salesperson in this category, but been in sales for 20 years now, and it is a very self-centered industry. And so it is very countercultural to be a selfless salesperson. And every time I have encountered someone that was more customer focused and less about self, they inevitably they go farther and farther in their career. And there might be times where they lose the battle, but they win the war every single time. And so I think that's just an important thing to remember um, when you are on those individual sales calls, no matter what you're doing, always acting with integrity and with the customer's best interest in mind, and seeking to serve them first.
Yeah, 100%. And I wonder what your take is on this, because I think I've done a lot of sales training over the years here and there, and I've had a couple of well, one really good coach, and a couple of not so good, coming more from the corporate typical way of selling.
Yes.
And I think that what I've taken from over the years is, when you're selling for yourself, when it's your business, then and your name is on the door, so to speak, and especially if you are the one also involved in the service delivery, it's like you're so integral to the whole process that, like, that what we're describing here should be natural. It should be like, of course this is the way you're going to sell, because everything about this is going to affect you personally, your brand, your business, them, and that whole cycle. But I think that, because this is just my opinion, but like, when you're working for somebody as a salesperson, if you don't make those sales, like, you're not getting paid. And
Hmm.
so that's such a it can change, I think, the way that you approach that sale. So it must be, I imagine, and I'm now thinking back to the people that have worked for me as salespeople over the years in the past, like working for someone as a salesperson and having this level of integrity to be able to push back and say no and serve, serve, serve. Like, do you have experience in helping to, or how to get other people to sell for you at this level, rather than a level of, self-service, because commissions is how I basically get paid? Do you see where I'm coming from with this? That
Yes.
makes sense,
So
yeah.
I have an example for you from when I was in corporate and I was selling, and I will, to answer your question, it starts with leadership and the culture that they set. And I have been a part of amazing leadership that set this kind of culture, and really, really poor leadership. And so we're talking about, you lost $100,000 deal, you need to go find another $100,000 deal to replace it. And it's your Friday sales calls, or pipeline calls are full of yelling, and that kind of culture. And so this example that I'm going to give you was, I was in that culture. And so my engineer and I were working on several $100,000 solution for a company. And our company had just acquired um, a storage company, higher level technology company that we were really pushing, right? But in this case, it was not the right fit for this customer. It was not the right fit. And so my manager wanted us to upsell him by about $150,000 to this new product, but they didn't need it. Would that have helped my quota? 100%. But it wasn't the right solution, and it wasn't the right fit, and it wasn't the right thing to do. And so I remember, and this is, I am a very, you know, rule follower, by the book, respectful person, but it is the one time in my career that I had a manager call me and just yelling. And I stood my ground of why I was proposing the solution. And the one time I have ever said to a manager, I didn't just hang up on him, but I said, I am going to hang up now because if I don't, you and I are both going to lose our cool and things are not going to end well. We ended up beating our competition and getting the PO and winning the deal. And he ended up apologizing for the way he acted. But I will never forget that example because we did the right thing by the customer. It was the right solution. And it would have been easy to sell something that was more, expensive to fulfill that quota, right? But it starts with leadership and it starts with setting the right culture. And if your leadership is, or you as the business owner are putting that kind of pressure, then your salespeople are going to cut corners. They're going to sell the wrong solution. They're going to, and they're going to, upsell the customer to something that they don't need. But if you set a culture where you are serving before you're selling, then that's an easy win for your customers and for your business.
Yeah, totally. And well done you for standing your ground.
Ooh, that was a yeah. Mm. We'll never forget that one. Leadership lessons, what not to do.
Yeah. I think like from perspective of reward as well, if you have a reward system which is purely based on front end sales, then that in itself could be a reason for people to sell potentially for the wrong reasons. Whereas if you reward sales on the back end, as in like longevity or lifetime value of a client, or when a client hits a certain milestone or period, then you're getting the investment from the salesperson to sell to someone who's going to stick around and get good value from
Hmm.
your product. So um, that's that we tried that as well, but then unfortunately the relationship we before we could really see the if that worked as an approach, I stopped working with the person. But anyway, next
And
time.
there's lots of other metrics that you could use for that, depending
Yeah,
on what what you're tracking and what KPIs you're tracking within your company. I mean, you could do NPS, you could do, customer lifetime value, or lots of different things. But you could also, just look at this, just culture rewards, things like that. And so I think if you're really in tune with your people and a good leaders, there doesn't even necessarily have to be um, a set, you know, monetary reward system. It should be recognition all the time, and it should be talked about all the time. Like that, to me, that is the first step, because not everyone, believe it or not, even some of your top salespeople are not coin operated. And some people are like, what? Are in sales? I wasn't coin operated. And so I like managers that first worked with me, like they didn't understand that. And I remember a higher up director sent me a gift card in the mail for closing a big deal. What meant more to me was the handwritten letter that he wrote. So it's knowing your people and really, setting that kind of culture up front.
I don't know if you read the book by the founders of Basecamp. I think it's called something like "It Doesn't Have to Be Like That at Work" or something along them lines.
I
Um,
haven't read that. I'll have to
but
look it
it's
up.
interesting. It's basically a book for their policies, and one of their policies was about rewards, including sales rewards. And don't quote me on this because it's a long time since I read it, but what I remember from it is they actually had no sales rewards or commission based bonuses. It was all bonuses were based on the increase in profit of the company that year at the end of the year. And it was shared equally pro rata against levels of wages, whatever, but shared equally across all the staff because their recognition was that the entire business, the entire team, everything about that, from sales to delivery to whatever, that is what generates the increase in profit. And therefore,
Yeah.
a percentage of that increase in profit, which is given back to the staff as a reward. And I thought that was they had they've got some really nice policies in there. That's one that's
Yeah.
always stuck with me about not rewarding individuals because there is no one individual. Like the person that designs the product and the material that goes behind the sale that gets that person, the right person in front of the salesperson. I mean, their work is equally, if not more valuable in some respects than the person closing the deal. So that's the way they looked at it. It's like there's not one individual who's responsible for any sale. So
Yeah.
quite like that.
Which is very true. Yeah.
Cool. Before we wrap up, one thing that's come up, and I've not found a way just to feed this back in naturally, so I'm just going to chuck it in there, is that it came up when we were talking before about feeling that your product is or is not good enough. And I
Hmm.
think that one of the challenges that I face over the years is that I have a perception in my mind about what I want my product to be and like how good I want it to be. And it may be because I've experienced amazing products in the past and I want to sort of do something equal to them. But knowing that they have multi-million pound budgets to deliver something like that doesn't take away the fact that I still want to do the same. So I can feel, and I know that many of my clients are the same as this. When I speak to them about their feelings about sales, about prices, about when to launch, etc., etc. And so the question is that if your product is at a certain level and you don't feel like, for example, or just you don't feel that it's like at the pinnacle that you believe it should be. So if I wanted to charge, regardless of what it is, if I wanted to charge $10,000 for my finished product, I think it's going to be amazing. But maybe I think it's like at 60% level. And like, so the challenge is like, do I just keep on working at it in the background to get it to that top level before you start selling? Or how do I approach the sales where I don't feel I can sell it for what I think it's going to be worth because it's not there yet? But then do I reduce the promise on what I'm offering? Or do I reduce the price or a bit of both? I'm sure you've experienced
Yes.
this dilemma that you have in business as you're growing and you're developing and etc. And I'd love to get your insights and thoughts on this.
Yeah. So first I'll say I am a recovering perfectionist. So I hear this kind of question all of the time. Um, I will put a caveat first. It depends on what industry you're in and what product that you have. Whether you're putting a 60% perfect product out there, right? But if it is a viable product and it is that extra bit is because of your perfectionism, I always recommend to put it out there because there is so much value in customer feedback. And some of the best improvements I have made on my own products, and you might think, Andee, they're candles. How much improvement can you make? Well, product packaging is one of the best sellers that you have for your products. And I have had some of the best feedback from retailers that didn't buy my products about my product packaging that I was able to then go take and implement and improve. And because of that constructive feedback, when it wasn't perfect yet, now I can't help but think how many more retailers are carrying my product because I was willing to put it out there before it was exactly perfect and exactly what I wanted it to be. But I was willing to put it out there and get the feedback and to not take it personally, to not, let that deter me from my mission of getting my candles on retailer shelves. And so I say that because you have to be willing to take it from that perspective and get feedback and use it to implement it and make your product, take your product from that 60 to 100%. So I absolutely would put it out there, but do it in a way that you can effectively get feedback and use that in a valuable way.
Yeah, cool. What I've done in the past, just reflecting as you're talking now, is put things out as with a beta label on them. I'm just saying,
Mm,
or like getting people in at the founders level, or at the point where like you are being open, saying this isn't finished, so you're going to get a maybe a little bit of a better price or a higher level of service that people can expect in the future, and that has actually worked very, very well. But
yeah,
I've not done
that's
that for a long time, and maybe that's what I need to do rather than holding back for the next big release. Is actually just start getting people in, but being open and honest about where it's at in the process of development.
that's actually a great point. So, flipping the switch because I personally sell both products and services.
Yeah,
So I gave a product example, but talking about a course, when I first launched my wholesale course, I did exactly that. And I sold it as a founder's round. And part of the value that the people that invested in the founders round received, they got a pretty significant discount, but they got a guided 4 week implementation. So it was 4 weeks of coaching with me. But part of that in return, they gave me feedback at every step of the way that I took and went back and updated my course with the feedback that those founder students gave. And so they knew exactly when they signed up that they were signing up for a founder's round. And I even promised them that they would get the updates that I made so that, they wouldn't feel like they were missing out on, the final piece or the final version. And that worked out really, really well. So I highly encourage that if you're doing a program, a coaching program, or a course, launch a founders round and be very transparent about it. And part of them getting a discount or whatever you're providing, coaching, is that they give you feedback that you can then take and implement.
yeah. Going back, whatever it is now, 9, 10 years, that is exactly what I did. That's how I started this business, the coaching business that I do now. But I guess I've been hesitant to do it because I've been around for 10 years. It's like going back and saying, oh, here's a new beta coming out. It's a big launch for something that's not quite finished yet. That's actually almost like, I guess it's a pride thing, or like, I don't know what the word is, but like worrying that that's going to actually have a negative impact in some way. I tell you, I was thinking about this the other day. This is a random side, but I was on the ski slopes on Friday last week, and I was thinking to myself about I couldn't get my carving turns done, whatever. So I went in for my lunch break and I got on YouTube and I watched some videos on not on YouTube on my a coaching app on about how to improve. And it talks about doing these drills. And these drills are basically going back to basics, looking like a beginner on the slopes, falling over a lot, because that's how you learn the edge of your limit. So then when you start going faster again, you can do it. And it reminded me about like, look, I've got to a level of skiing now, like with the business, that I'm way, way ahead of most people. But I now need to make myself look stupid in order to break through. And that just listening to you speaking now, I mean, thinking about that analogy, then it's exactly the same. It's like you've got to be prepared to make yourself look stupid now and again. Not stupid, but take the risk of
Yeah.
actually it not being perfect. You go back to wearing the hat of the beginner's mind, like in Zen speak, going back to the beginner's mind and being open to accept that actually, there is a hell of a lot more to learn, and opening your doors to invite that feedback and criticism, or constructive or otherwise. So yeah,
I think clients appreciate that vulnerability too. And I venture to guess, I have been an entrepreneur now for 2 years, and I know you have been doing it a lot longer. So you probably have a lot more of that core group of people that have been following you for a long time that would jump at the chance to invest in like a beta program or founders program. And sometimes if I am launching something new, even if it's something small, I will email that group and say, who wants to beta test this? And so that might be a great way for, whatever you're launching, have that group that has been steady and has invested in like every program that you've done. Email them because they're probably the ones that are going to provide the best feedback, the most honest feedback for you. And they're also probably not going to judge you because they're already super fans. So yeah.
Yes, very, very good point, and something I will definitely take away.
Yeah.
Because I don't think I don't sell often enough. I think people probably would like me to try to sell to them more often than I do because it happens so rarely.
None of us
There you
do.
go.
None of us do.
So,
So, yeah.
Andy, before we finish up, I should say, let people know how they can find out more about you, what you do, and if they want to learn more about your services.
Yes, thank you for asking. So, I have a podcast as well. It's called She Sells Differently, and you can find me on my website is actually andeehart.com, spelled a little different, Andee heart.com. And yeah, so I hope to hear from you soon.
We'll put your links in the show notes as always. Before we go, I have one final question for you, which I ask everybody. This title of this podcast is Systemize Your Success, but what does success mean to you?
Success for me personally, and when I became an entrepreneur, I kind of had a countdown when I was going to leave corporate, and it was I called it tattoo time. That was when I was going to leave corporate and get my first and only tattoo, but it's solely Deo Gloria, and that means glory to God alone. And so that success to me means that whatever I am doing, that I am going to glorify the Lord and honor Him with my gifts. So if I am doing that, then I am being successful.
Wonderful. Great answer. And I love your tattoo, by the way. I saw it on Instagram.
Yes.
Cool,
Thank
Andy.
you.
Thank you so much for today. As I thought would happen at the beginning of this episode, I have taken away lots of massively useful things, some reminders of stuff that I should have already known or should be thinking about, and lots of new stuff as well. So, yeah, I'm really grateful for your openness and your service and just being here to give value. So, thank you so much for your time today.
Thanks for having me. I really enjoyed it.